Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. So welcome to this webinar on the implication of the EU strategy for sustainable textile for the Belgian fashion sector. Thank you for your large interest. You were many to register today, over 250 registration. So that's great. It demonstrates the large interest for the topic. This webinar is co-organized by Flanders DC, Mad Brussels, Wallonie Brussels Design and Mode, and the Shift that I represent, as well as the Belgian SDG Charter for International Development that some of you may have signed and committed to already. Let me remind you a few rules. I'll take the presentation. So you're all on mute, of course, but feel free to chat with each other via the chat on the right side of your window. There is a Q&A module. If you have any questions to address to the speakers, please ask them in the Q&A module and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. Of course, specify your name and organization so we know who you are and whom your question is addressed to. We've organized the quick polls on the right side of the window just to get to know better who is there with us today. If you can take a few seconds to quickly respond to the questions, that would be great. So I think we're all aware of the significant environmental damage and human rights violation caused by the fashion industry everywhere in the world, and including, of course, in Europe. The causes are very complex, and the responsibility is diffused between many stakeholders, again, all over the world. This means that a systemic change is absolutely needed, and this is expected from the European Union. Last year, a group of 65 civil society organizations developed a very comprehensive proposition of a European strategy for sustainable textile, garments, and footwear, which has already been supported by more than 50 members of the European Parliament. I won't go into details now, but you can find the link in the sewing box. It's a takeaway document that we've prepared especially for this event, and that you will receive that after the webinar, along with the recording. It's a kind of toolbox full of useful information, including a glossary of all the main concepts that we've covered today, and relevant platforms, actors, and the initiative. Let's cover the planning. So how is the EU, the European Union, responding to these challenges, and what can a fashion company do to be aligned with the civil society strategy and potential European legislation? To respond to these questions today, we have divided the webinar into 3 panels. First, we will seek to understand what is actually happening at the EU level, knowing that things are moving, but nothing has been validated yet. Then panel 2 on extended producer responsibility and panel 3 on due diligence process will help us understand what companies can do to guarantee more sustainable products and potentially prepare for upcoming legislation at the European level. So let's start now with part 1, and let me introduce our first 2 panelists. So we have with us Sophie Bouteiller. Thank you, Sophie, for joining us. Sophie is policy advisor on European and international policies at OVAM, the public waste agency of the government of Flanders, and together with her colleague Evelyne Lafont, she also represents OVAM in the leadership group on textiles of the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform. Sophie will give us a good overview of the key concepts to be familiar with to understand the EU policy around sustainable textile. And then we have Maria Rincon-Lievana. She's team leader within the unit in charge of the implementation of the Circular Economy Action Plan at the DG Environment from the European Commission. Maria has been working on circular economy policies for the past 5 years with a particular focus on textiles. And Maria will tell us more about what is currently happening at the EU level around sustainable textile, of course, bearing in mind that nothing is confirmed yet. Can I see the polls? I'll look at it later. So I'll leave the floor now to Sophie Bouteiller. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rieu, for this introduction. I'm just waiting until my presentation is uploaded. Okay, it's there. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I have been asked to give you a brief introduction to sustainability in the textile industry and to explain some key policy concepts. And I will do that from a circular economy perspective. As you know, the textile value chain is a global chain with many social, environmental, and economic challenges. And if we look at this from a circular economy perspective, the most pressing ones are that this is a linear chain with increasing consumption of raw materials and rising volumes of waste. We also see that the quality of textiles is going down, and this reduces the lifespan of textiles. It reduces the opportunities for reuse and high quality recycling. There's some little transparency in the chain regarding product information, and the trade in used or discarded textiles is under pressure, and some of the negative aspects of this trade are not sufficiently dealt with. So this as a general background, and we've seen in the past years many initiatives, mostly voluntary, from industry or in public-private partnerships, but there is clearly a need for a EU framework for this. Luckily, in the past year, some very important EU policy documents have been launched, and Maria will tell you more about them. The end of 2019, the European Commission launched its Green Deal, and the Green Deal is a strategy to make the EU's economy more sustainable. Part of that European Green Deal, you can see on the slide, there's many initiatives that fall under this European Green Deal, is the Circular Economy Action Plan. And in that action plan, the Commission announces that there will be an EU strategy for textiles. This strategy will not only contribute to, or has the potential to contribute to circular economy ambitions, but also to many more ambitions that are set in the European Green Deal, like zero pollution, the protection of natural capital, achieving climate neutrality, and so on. As said, I will explain some of the key policy concepts because you will hear them very often, and it's always good to know what they actually mean, what they are about. Some of these concepts will be dealt with in more detail later today, and those are due diligence and extended producer responsibility. On the screen, you see the definition of due diligence as formulated by the OECD. And so due diligence is a process enterprises should carry out to identify, prevent, mitigate, and account for how they address actual and potential adverse impacts in their own operations, their supply chain, and other business relationships. And these impacts relate to human rights, social issues, and environmental issues. When we discuss the circular economy, it's clear that linear business models of take, make, dispose are creating multiple challenges, and that we need to move to new business models. On this slide, I've put some key concepts that discuss this kind of new business models. If you're interested in more detail on this, I really recommend to have a look at two reports. One is a report by Systemic and Club of Rome. It's called System Change Compass. And the other one is Rethinking Ownership by Citra. So three types of, or three concepts that we use when we discuss new business models. The first one is sufficiency-based business models. And actually, we're talking about a focus on influencing consumer behavior and trying to moderate overall resource consumption. How is that possible? It's possible by reducing the demand through education and consumer engagement, but it's also possible by producing products that last longer and by avoiding built-in obsolescence. Then when we discuss circular business models, we are actually talking about keeping products and materials in circulation for as long as possible. And that means that they can be shared, rented, repaired, maintained, upgraded, recycled, or reused. And then producer ownership models, they link to circular business models. There we go from, we shift basically from owning to using. So the customer shifts from ownership of the materials or the products towards their use, sharing, borrowing, renting, and the ownership remains with the manufacturing, such as a company, which remains responsible for the products throughout the life cycle. What is key in circular economy, and also when we look at textiles, is the design of the products and how well that is done. This greatly influences further steps down the life cycle of a product. Here, when we discuss design, we can discuss design strategies on the one hand, but also really requirements on the eco-design. At OVAM, we produced a practical guide for circular professional textiles, and the circular design strategies that we mentioned there are the following, like optimize the function, select sustainable materials, use materials efficiently, optimize the production process, reduce impact of logistics, reduce impact of use, aim for an optimum life cycle, and think about the end of life phase. So these are really all kinds of strategies that you can try to implement. But in EU, we also have eco-design requirements. So far, certain products must comply with these requirements when they're put on the market, and this relates mostly to energy. And it's announced in the Circular Economy Action Plan that the Commission will have a look at these eco-design requirements and see whether they can go beyond energy-related products, so as to make the eco-design framework applicable to the broadest possible set of products and make it deliver on circularity as well. Another concept is extended producer responsibility, and this will be discussed in much more detail later. This is defined in the EU Waste Framework Directive. And here it says that an extended producer responsibility scheme means that a set of measures taken by member states to ensure that producers of products bear the financial responsibility or the financial and organizational responsibility for the management of the waste stage of products life cycle. Such EPR schemes can be organized in all kinds of different ways. But the bottom line is that there is a system to collect, sort, and treat the waste, and that a financial system is in place for that. And on my last slide, I would like to draw attention to two policy instruments that are in development in France and in Germany, because I think they're very interesting for the debate on an EU strategy for textiles. The first one is that recently France introduced a ban on the destruction of unsold goods under an anti-waste law. So brands that are selling goods such as clothing, electrical goods, but also cosmetics will be forced to reuse, resell, or recycle the products of the unsold goods instead of destroying them. And Germany recently agreed on a draft bill that introduces a duty or an obligation of care that applies to customer returns of shipped products. So it will mainly affect e-commerce and mail order companies. And by introducing this new duty, the government bans the practice of online retailers to destroy returned products for cost reasons. So this is a very brief introduction, but we thought it was good to explain some of the key concepts, because for sure during today's event we will discuss them a lot, and then it's good to have some background knowledge on them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophie. It was a very good overview, and to all of you, of course, we'll go into more details, as I said, on some of the topics covered, and Maria will, of course, explore these topics a bit more. I see that some of you have responded to the polls. Don't hesitate to respond. We have 28 response. We see that a majority of the attendees represent fashion brands in Belgium and others, which is great. And most of you also know a little bit or quite not much about the EU legislation on sustainable textile. So it's great. It means that we are hopefully going to help you today to understand better what's going on. Now I'll leave the floor to Marianne.
Hello, good morning. Thank you very much, Sophie, because the presentation your first presentation has facilitated mine. I'm certainly going to touch base on many of the topics you have raised. As has been said before by Sophie, we have in Europe a comprehensive agenda to move towards sustainability and sustainable growth. If we move, I can move myself. That is the European Green Deal. You have seen already this visual. It only shows the comprehensive agenda that the European Green Deal laid out in December 2019. We are slowly but surely implementing this agenda. There's several of these initiatives that have already been presented by the European Commission in a year that has not been easy because of the impact of the economic crisis unleashed by the COVID outbreak. But we believe that the agenda presented in the European Green Deal is an agenda for the future to ensure that there's a recovery that is resilient and sustainable. So trying to make it right this time, to try to set up the pillars for an economic development that is respectful with the limit of the planets and with the protection of the environment. So you see that one of the actions that were included in this European Green Deal was the Circular Economy Action Plan. This was one of the first deliverable after the climate law that was adopted on the 11th of March of 2020, so almost a year ago. And the agenda that was set up in the Circular Economy Action Plan, it's not completely new because the European Commission was building up over the first Circular Economy Action Plan that was adopted in 2015, that was defining circular economy as an economic model where the value of materials and products and resources is kept within the economy for as long as possible. This means minimizing waste and better dealing with the waste that we generate. The new action plan presents a new vision for Europe, whereas the first Circular Economy Action Plan was looking at closing the loop, mainstreaming circularity along the life cycle of products, but also supporting the uptake of secondary raw material. This second action plan really looks at how we produce and consume in Europe, and proposes an agenda to change how we do it, not only to reduce environmental impact, but also to support the social agenda and the cohesion of the European Union, but also to boost competitiveness of businesses. And the action plan introduces this sustainable product policy framework that is a framework that will be rolled out on the basis of 3 strands of work that are also very relevant for textiles. One is designing products that are sustainable in Europe, making sustainable products the norm in the EU, but also empowering consumers and public buyers to opt for these products and working on sustainable production processes. The action plan also identifies key product value chains where the potential for circularity is the highest, but also where the environmental impacts are also high. So trying to match the agenda of the circular economy in those sectors where there's more need for sustainability and resource efficiency. In the past action plan, one of the priority sector was plastics, and we saw that it was very successful to propose a material-specific approach, so looking at the whole life cycle of this material. Some of these, we see it in the second action plan. For instance, in the case of textiles, we continue implementing the action on plastics. We continue as well with the objective of making packaging recyclable and reusable by 2030. We will look as well on electronics and ICT, and we continue mainstreaming circularity in the case of constructions and buildings, and as well in the biotic side of the economy on trying to make food, water, and nutrients and the actions linked to them more sustainable, where circularity provides a benefit. The action plan continues looking at waste to try to reduce waste in the first place, and when it's not possible, to improve recycling and the use of recycled materials. As I has introduced before, the action plan identifies textiles as a key sector, a key product value chain, where the elements of the sustainable product policy framework will be applied. The Circular Economy Action Plan proposes to present a comprehensive EU strategy for textiles. And what the action plan announces is that the Commission will work with the industry and with the stakeholders to make sure that this strategy is co-created and that it builds up in the several initiatives that on one hand have been announced in the action plan, but on the other have been put forward by the European Commission and stakeholders in the past years, because sustainability in the field of textile it's not new, and there's several activities that have been carried out in the past that can contribute to the circularity and the sustainability of the sector. You see here in this slide some of the highlights of the action plan regarding textiles, and I will try to go into more details in some of these in the next part of my presentation. In terms of preparation of the strategy, as Rio was mentioning at the beginning during the introduction, we need to take into account that we are right now in the preparatory phase. The Commission adopted the roadmap for the Sustainable Textile Strategy. That is a policy document where the Commission provides more detail on strategy. This roadmap was open to public feedback until the 5th of February. We received around 200 responses from stakeholders, wide variety of stakeholders, and we are assessing the results. The plan is that in the coming weeks, a month, we launch as well an open public consultation to continue gathering the views of stakeholders, and the plan is to present this policy document by the end of the year. So, I have prepared this slide, but I think it was covered a little bit by the presentation of Sophie, why textile has been identified in the circular economy. I would say that it's for three major reasons. On one side, the economic perspective. We cannot forget that the textile sector has been one of the most impacted by the COVID outbreak. You have here the results of the survey conducted by Euratex, that is the European organization gathering in textile industry, which gives an overview of the difficulties of the difficulties for the sector linked to the crisis. We also look at the environmental impacts of textiles and the textile sector in terms of materials. We have a very recent report from the European Environmental Agency that talks about the impacts of textiles. For instance, it's the fourth highest pressure category in terms of use of primary raw materials. There's a lot of waste that goes to landfill or incineration, which means that it's materials that we are losing. And then also we see that there's a tendency to when textiles are recycled, they are used for applications that don't keep the whole value, what is called downcycling in technical terms. There's other environmental impacts that are being looked at. For instance, the generation of greenhouse gas emissions, and also social impact. So there's a lot of reasons why we need to act, why both the European Commission but also the stakeholders need to be more aware of the impacts of production and consumption of textiles. And this is some of the reasons why the textile sector was highlighted as with potential for circularity. As I was saying, the textile sector could benefit from several actions along the value chain. This is something that we will try to catch in the textile strategy. On one side, we need to look at how we design and produce textile products, and for that it would be interesting to see the developments on one of the major initiatives of the Circular Economy Action Plan, that is the Sustainable Products Initiative. As Sophie was explaining before, we have design requirements in the European Union that are mostly applicable to energy related products, and what the action plan does is to announce that the Commission is going to look how and we can expand and widen the co-design, the scope of the co-design directive beyond these products, to try to apply it to the broadest range of products. This is a legislative proposal that is currently being in preparation, and that is expected by the end of the year. And the idea is that this Sustainable Products Initiative will look into sustainability principles and design requirement to look and to improve and to mainstream some of these notions that you see in this slide, that is designed to improve durability, reusability, and repairability. So fully in line with the concept of circular economy, of making the life of products, or making products to last longer, but also looking at other elements, for instance, like addressing the presence of hazardous chemicals. Of course, supporting the increased and the uptake of recycled content from the point of view of design. So recycled. The Sustainable Products Initiative might as well look into how to restrict those products, the single use, so products that are designed only for one used, to counter from the design phase as well premature obsolescence, provide support for business models, as Sophie was mentioning, and as well digitalization. There's several product categories that are identified in the action plan, and textile is one of them. So when developing the strategy, the Commission will take into account the developments as well on the preparation of this Sustainable Product Initiative, because they are completely interlinked. As I was saying, we can not only act on, or we should not only act on the design of the beginning of the life cycle, but also provide consumers with the right information in order for them to choose sustainable textiles. We have already in place 2 policy tools that are voluntary, that is the EU Eco Label for textiles and products and footwear, but also Green Public Procurement criteria. These 2 tools are voluntary. There's many businesses already in the European Union that are using EU Eco Label to award their textile products. So a good way to communicate to consumers of the reduced environmental impact along the life cycle of their products. And then there's many public authorities in Europe that are integrating this Green Public Procurement criteria in their procurements. We are also working with businesses for them to be able to substantiate the green claims they make around their products. And on that, the Circular Economy Action Plan announced announces a legislative proposal that is also in preparation. As you say, there's many things going on right now. And then also industry is working on developing product category rules or looking at the life cycle assessment on the basis of the methodology that the Commission has been working with industry to pilot in the past 5 years. That is the product environmental footprint. That is looking at the whole life cycle of your product to assess where, in which phase you have the biggest environmental impact and how to measure it in a harmonized way. I wanted to also flag the importance of new business models. Sophie has given very good references. I want to add one more. That is a recent study, a recent report, sorry, from the European Environmental Agency on business models at large, but it has a specific focus on textiles, and then proposes not only policy recommendations for policymakers, but also elements that can facilitate for businesses the uptake of these business models. Then this business model, you can see them in different angles with a contribution to circular economy. For on one hand, that they ensure products longevity and durability, and then you have just below some of the samples that are highlighted by this report of the European Environmental Agency. Also to promote asset access-based models. So this idea of consumer doesn't keep the ownership, but uses the product, and then the ownership remains in the producer. Then business model to facilitate textile collection and resale, and then business model to increase recycling and reusing materials. It's indeed this report, a very interesting report that is worth reading, that you have it in the link in the slide. And then finally, and closing the loop of textile and circular economy, you have to consider as well the waste legislation that is in place for the whole all the member states. It was the latest review was adopted in 2018, what we call the waste package, and there are some provisions that are general, but also will impact textiles. For instance, the 2018 waste package introduces strengthened provisions on waste prevention that will look at several products, but it will include textiles. Then by 2025, separate collection of textiles will be in place. So member states will need to start collecting textiles. This will have an impact in the market, because suddenly we will see an increase of this waste stream that will require support on recycling facilities. And then the legislation also asks the Commission to consider preparing for reuse and recycling targets. So similarly, as I have in the first bullet point, but also for other waste streams, and this might include as well textile. You need to see that the Commission is looking into all the legal obligations that are included in the waste package, and it's starting preparatory work to be able to deliver by the deadline that is set in the legislation. And then concretely, the impacts I already mentioned it in the case of textile waste, is that there's an expected increase due to the separate collection obligation. And then we might also need to consider the impact and the potential of extended producer responsibility. There's a country that have it already in place, France, others that are considering it. You know that you have a whole panel discussion on this, so I will not go into much more details other than say that there's minimum requirements for APR schemes that are laid out in the 2018 waste package, and that, as stated in the roadmap of the textile strategy, the Commission might consider extended producer responsibility. And finally, not to leave out the third panel of the morning, responsible value chains, and what the Commission is doing on this. On one hand, I would like to introduce an initiative that is being prepared, that is expected by the the second quarter of 2021. That is the Sustainable Corporate Governance. It's a legislative proposal that the Commission is preparing that will set up horizontal measures and what is called the due diligence duty. This sustainable corporate governance is expected to be applied across sectors. So it's an horizontal framework, and therefore the OECD due diligence guidance for responsible business conduct for textile on what is relevant for textile will continue applying. It will include as well measures, or it's expected that it includes measures for facilitating enforcement and implementation mechanisms. This you have in the link under the Sustainable Corporate Governance more information on exactly what the barriers that the proposal is expected to address, and the data that we have justifying the action. And as I was saying, this is a legislative proposal that is expected later this year that need to be read and taken into account when looking at the revision of the EU Non-Financial Reporting Directive that includes or will include and will clarify the obligations of large public interest companies to report on due diligence processes. More information and indeed more discussions in the third panel session. And then I would like just to finalize connecting you to the Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform, where you find good practices, reports, knowledge, information, and also the possibility to exchange with other stakeholders on circular economy, and of course on circular economy applied to textiles. As Sophie was saying, there's work already on textile, and OBAM and other stakeholders are leading the work on this work. It's around in the Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform, so I encourage you to check it out. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria. And I think the least we can say is that there's many things ongoing at the EU level, and so we're looking forward to see how it gets more concrete. So there was a few questions. First, I'll respond to a comment that came up several times. We received the presentation. For your information, we'll just make sure that it's fine with all the speakers today to share the presentation, and if that's the case, we'll share the presentation. But of course, we'll share the recording of the webinar today with all of you. Also, for your information, I repeat that we will send a document where we have compiled lots of information and many links to relevant platforms and actors and initiatives that we are mentioning today. So that will be quite useful. And also have a look at the closed loop page if you want to have more information. There's plenty of information on there. Questions. So we have a few questions for Sophie and Maria. I'll start with this one from Gregory Rorive. How will giants such as Amazon, Zalando be impacted by this new German rule forbidding the destruction of returned goods? Is it going to be another case of small companies complying but giants not being bothered, or did they actually plan proper actions to enforce this? That's a tough question. Maria, do you feel, or Sophie?
I have to say that I'm not aware about the initiative presented by the German government, and I need to read again the question, but it's in the chat. If you give me it, I think it's linked to the idea that we need to. There would be. So it's linked to the idea of banning the destruction of unsold goods partially because they got goods that are returned. I think it's at EU level, there's an interest as well at looking at this. It's part of the Circular Economy Action Plan in the section of sustainable products. It's still too early for me to anticipate how this will be done or which shape it will take, because we are in the process of assessing all the possibilities. But it's something certainly that we are looking at and our inspiration, or the first time we were hearing of this, at least personally, is the case of the French law. And I think that to the extent possible are these big companies that are the most affected by it, because it's the number of items. And I think that there's a role for enforcement mechanisms, and this it sure will accompany anything that is done at the EU level, and I'm sure it's also something that the German government is taking into account. I don't know if Sophie has more details on this.
Yeah, I can maybe add a little bit of information. So it's now a draft bill. And if you look, I will share the link to the website of the Bundesministerium, where you can see the details of this policy instrument. But what you will also see is that for the practicalities, they're still working on that too. So, but for sure, we can share the link to the website where you find the information where this policy instrument is now in development. Given that the German government also announced recently an initiative on sustainable corporate governance for big companies, I assume that also this policy instrument on the returned goods will not only affect small companies, but also the big ones. But on the details of how it will be implemented, I can send the link, and it is in development right now, so it will become a bit more clear in the near future.
Thank you. So we have another question related to this new deal between the EU and China, the new trade agreement. So China first export of textile products to EU, no sustainable requirement in the new bilateral trade agreement. Is it coherent with the Green Deal?
The Green Deal is very clear about including this sustainability more prominently in the trade relations with third countries. So little by little, I think they will be more in line with the European Green Deal. I want to also highlight that it's that the transformative agenda that I have presented in relation to the Circular Action Plan. It's a process, so it needs to be taken into account that we cannot change the world in like this in a second. So yes, it's going to take time, but the purpose is to create a system that ensures the highest standard on sustainability, both in the trade relations, but also when putting products in the market. And this is something that will be looked at with the Sustainable Products Initiative.
Yeah. If I can add a small thing, next week there will be an EU circular talk on trade, resource extraction, and circular economy, and there it is exactly this kind of questions that will be discussed. There will be a report from UNEP and IRP that is presented, and it will discuss how trade can actually give a boost to circular economy and thoughts on that. So it might be useful, and I share that link as well today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have another question from Vanessa Collignon that raised some interest as well. Where can we send our waste textile to be recycled, especially natural textiles? We only produce 100% natural products from hemp, linen, and cotton. There are no plastics or artificial fibers in our products. Maybe that's for you, Sophie.
I can answer that question right now. You will have to find the right company and so on. So yeah.
It's a bit more technical, but we'll try to gather the information and maybe again have a look at the Close the Loop website. There's another question from Gregory Horiv. Does the Commission have an actual plan to stop relying on environmentally and humanly dubious Chinese imports, textiles, electronics, etc.? Any chance to reinforce collaboration between European producers and manufacturers?
I think that there was an overlap in the first part of the question, but I think it's relevant as well to highlight this idea of collaboration between producers and manufacturers. it's key for the circular economy that we facilitate the communication along the value chain, and not only because the flow of information on what that product contains, it's essential, for instance, to be able to recycle it, but also because by putting together different part of the industry, they can understand each other better on challenges and needs and requirements. This is something that has been very successful, and we have seen it, for instance, with the Alliance for Batteries, but also with the Circular Plastic Alliance, where you have the whole value chain talking to each other and addressing some of the challenges that they find in the day-to-day business. You know, for instance, in the case of Circular Plastic Alliance, they were looking at how to support the uptake of recycled plastics, looking at the mismatches between supply and demand, so that the supply of recycled plastic is the quality that they require with the amount they need and the price they need, and also looking at the elements that drive demand, what is needed for the producer to incorporate this recycled material in final products. So this type of collaborations are not only good but necessary in order to facilitate the uptake of circularity. So yes, it's a plan to continue working in collaboration, and therefore reinforcing the collaboration between the producers and manufacturers.
Thank you. Sophie, do you want to add something? No. Good. And there's another question from Valerie Otterbeeks. Are there any other targets defined in the EU policy for fashion sector except sorting by 2025? If not, when will it come?
And unless Sophie wants to the separate collection obligation will enter into force end of 2024 and so in place as of 2025. This will mean that public authorities will need to start collecting this waste separately. So similarly as we do right now for packaging. So consumer will have also a key role to know where to place the textile that they are sending to waste. And the idea is that we increase recycling, but also we act with consumer to address maybe the short life times of textile products. Regarding all the targets, and as I was saying in the slide, the Waste Framework Directive that was revised in 2018 asked the Commission to consider targets for preparation for reuse and recycling. So this would mean that at EU level, we set up a legal obligation to recycle X% of textile waste. It is too early for me to say what amount and how, because this is something that will be studied and assessed. But this framework directive asked the Commission to work on this and propose something in the time frame of 2024-2025, so coincident with the kickoff of the separate collection obligation. There might be some changes in this time frame because, of course, it will depend on many other elements, and it's too early, as I was saying, to talk about it. But it's interesting to see how also companies and public authorities look into this to start preparing the infrastructure that is needed to deliver on these elements. Excellent.
A last quick question before the break. We have 1 minute left, and that's probably for you, Maria. What is included in textile on the policies? Is cushion, carpets, curtains, poof, plates? Are they included all?
Well, it depends on the initiative that you are looking at, of the policy tool that you are looking at. And as I was saying in the presentation, I have introduced several policy tools already in place and others in preparation. The intention at the moment is that textile strategy covers textile more broadly and not only fashion. So it will include technical textiles or home textiles. But as I was saying, we are in the process of preparing this strategy. So you need to take this that I'm saying with a little bit of caution, because it is too early for me to confirm exactly this. But the Circular Economy Action Plan refers to textiles, and it doesn't make any difference in the sub-products of this sector.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you very much to both of you for your insights. It was very comprehensive and super interesting. Thank you all also for chatting using the chat window. I see there's a lot of interaction, and it's nice to see, because that's also one of the objective of today, is to create an interactive and environment and trigger dialogues between all actors in Belgium for more sustainable textile industry. So we'll take a short break and we'll be back at 10:30 sharp to start on extended producer responsibility. So see you in 9 minutes.
Hello.
Hello. Hello, welcome back, and welcome Céline and Emily. So let's start this new panel on the extended producer responsibility. So how to design a project for sustainable life, thinking about each step of the life of a product, from, of course, from conception to reuse and recycling. So today with us, we have Emily McIntosh, Policy Officer for Textile in the Circular Economy team at the European Environmental Bureau, the largest network of environmental citizens organization in Europe, with over 160 member organizations in more than 35 countries. Emily will give us a pragmatic introduction on the extended producer responsibility concept and how a legislation could be an opportunity for the environment and businesses. And then we have Céline Lejeune. Céline is the very committed co-founder of Bonjour Maurice, a slow fashion brand for kids. The clothes are designed for 100% sustainable life, from production to reuse and recycling. And it's quite impressive to see all the details they take into consideration. She will tell us more about it. Emily, the floor is yours.
Hi there, everyone. Thank you so much for having me this morning. Can you see my presentation okay? Yeah, perfect. So yes, as Brooke said, I'm Emily McIntosh from the European Environmental Bureau. And I'm following the textile strategy and all the different files related to the forthcoming textile strategy. And we heard about that in the first part of the morning. And just a quick word on where we're coming from to this. We hear a lot about circular economy, and in our approach to circular economy for textiles is very much that you need to slow down and reduce how much resources overall are put into the circle, i.e. the economy in the first place. So we're really advocating for an absolute reduction of resource use approach across all the different policy instruments that will be part of the textile strategy. So today I'm going to talk about one of those instruments, which is EPR, so Extended Producer Responsibility. So let's go to the next slide. So what is EPR? EPR can be defined as a market-based instrument, which is used to ensure that companies, so brands, retailers, and producers, are made responsible for what happens to the goods that they put on the market once they're no longer in use. So EPR exists in many different forms in different countries for electronic waste and packaging, and it doesn't exist yet, apart from in one country, which I'll come on to, for textiles. So just taking a step back to talk a little bit about what's the ideology essentially behind EPR. So the idea is really putting a financial responsibility onto producers, and it's a strategy to incorporate all the environmental externalities that occur during a product's life cycle into the market price. So we could say that it is the polluter pays principle in action, or one way to make the polluter pays principle, which is one of the main environmental principles of the EU, to become a reality. So it can be thought of as the levy on a product that you put into the price based on environmental performance. So of course, the key point is, how do you define what that fee is, and based on what metrics and what criteria? And a concept that comes up when we talk about EPR is eco-modulation. So that is the idea that you modulate the fee depending on a set of performance criteria, in very simple terms, that determine how sustainable or otherwise that product is. So, for example, you could have higher fees on a garment that is not designed according to an established set of durability criteria, repairability criteria, or material sourcing criteria, and for example. And that means that would be act as a market incentive to foster more uptake of garments that do respect those criteria. So my final point on this introductory slide is that EPR is very much a concept and not a clear-cut policy, as we will discuss. The good and bad news is that there's no neatly defined answer as to what is EPR and what is EPR for textiles. So with that in mind, let's have a look at the state of play. So that's the sort of principles of EPR, and now we're going to look at where are we with, is there going to be an EPR for textiles in Europe? Is there going to be one in Belgium, in different member states? So let's have a look at France. So France is the only country with an EPR scheme for textiles. So the first point I'd like to make is that a full evaluation of the French EPR scheme is really important before we can draw any recommendations for it. And if anybody on the webinar does have access to, has got any insights into an evaluation of the French scheme, I'm really interested to hear them. But just from some basic analysis that I've had a look at, the basic facts of the scheme, that in France, clothing collection points have trebled from 15,621 in 2011 to nearly 42,000 by 2016. And collection rates have increased by more than 50%. And over 90% of items collected are reused or recycled, and 97% of retailers in France are legally compliant. So the Netherlands, so that's France has EPR for textiles. The Netherlands wants an obligation for EPR for textiles. The Netherlands has said that it will introduce national rules on EPR for textiles, which it sees as a powerful instrument to encourage sorting, reusing, and recycling of textiles. But it also calls for a mandatory EU-wide EPR for textiles, given the interconnectedness of the EU market. And Sweden has also made plans to introduce an EPR textile scheme from the 1st of January 2022. And it may or may not include clothing, and it could be limited to just hotel and hospital textiles. So as you can see, different emerging approaches with different scopes. So yeah, very much, I think over the next months and years, we'll see different countries come out with different commitments on EPR. And in the UK, of course, not an EU member anymore, but it was quite a landmark report. A parliamentary committee recommended that the government put in place an EPR scheme for textiles, but this was rejected by the government. So it'll be interesting to see if that recommendation resurfaces, because of course, the UK no longer in the EU, but still a very influential and important market when it comes to, particularly for fashion. So, and yes, as was mentioned in the previous discussion, when we're talking about textiles, are we talking about fashion? Are we talking about carpets, mattresses? So I think that's the case for EPR as well. here I've talked about EPR schemes for textiles. So it's an open question. Will EPR have, how will EPR be designed to tackle different textile product categories? So as I mentioned there, some countries have expressed the wish for an EU approach. And just a quick look at what is happening at EU level. I won't go too much into this because these were mentioned by the previous speakers, but in the Circular Economy Action Plan and the forthcoming textile strategy are both paving the way for an EPR scheme for textiles, making different commitments on that. And the Commission is also currently working on a non-textile specific guidance document on eco-modulation. So, as I said, the key question is, and this is something for you to reflect on, would you prefer a mandatory EU-wide EPR for textiles or a different member state by member state approach? Of course, there's many things to think about there. The main one would be at the risk of patchwork if you have different EPR scheme in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in France. And then a more general thought about the risks of EPR schemes. And this is why it's important that we have a really full evaluation of the French scheme, is that there's also a risk with EPR in terms of governance. So how is an EPR scheme governed? Who decides how the EPR fee is spent and on what? That's a really, really key question when it comes to EPR. And brands can essentially manage their own EPR schemes, which can be fine. But if that involves just giving consumers more vouchers to consume more new textiles, I think we need to question to what extent such an EPR scheme is actually tackling overproduction and overconsumption. So we must pay close attention to depending on how an EPR scheme is designed, producers and retailers can have different degrees of control of the waste treatment. So yeah, just some food for thought and some risks that can occur. So the next part of my presentation, I'd like to raise the two key questions I think that are important for thinking about EPR and defining EPR for textiles are the following. One, how should the EPR fees be calculated? So how should they be calculated based on what criteria? And how will the fees gathered be used and what activities will they support? So I'll just quickly go into some bullet points on the two questions. So on the first one, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is where how should the fees be calculated? Eco-modulation is a way to calculate the fees. So if designed correctly, an EPR scheme could make manufacturers financially responsible for the costs of the garment associated throughout the whole life cycle. So it could take into the costs that are incurred and the true impact beyond waste management and the circularity potential of a product and drive uptake of better fibres and higher quality textiles. So by going beyond looking at the pure end of life impact and by going beyond just looking at the weight of the amount of products you put on the market and actually looking at the details of those products, you can actually incentivize eco-design and incentivize resource efficiency, for example. So in other words, while we're talking about EPR here, we're also talking about how EPR fits into the broader mix of policy instruments. So as was mentioned by the other speakers, one of the main policies that will be coming as part of the textile strategy is new minimum design requirements for textiles. So, and it's really important that EPR and eco-design work together. So basically, if you go above and beyond the eco-design minimum requirements, as a company, you should be rewarded under an EPR scheme with a lower fee. And that in turn encourages all market actors to take that progressive approach by going beyond the minimum requirements. So yes, and then by incentivizing sustainable design, this also has benefits for companies because you're having more access to the sustainable procurement market and potentially uptake of eco-label. So yeah, just a last word on eco-modulation. Some other things to think about. How could you modulate the fees? How could you decide how to calculate them? Could be looked at what efforts have been taken to remove hazardous chemicals from production, for example. So last point, how will the fees be used? So this is really important. What activities will they support? As we said earlier, there will be an obligation for public authorities to implement separate collection by 2025. We know that public authorities won't have the resources to pay for this without gathering cash through EPR schemes. But it's really what we see, that there's a real opportunity here for EPR, not just to fund collection, sorting, and ultimately a recycling approach, because we know we can't recycle our way out of overproduction. We can also use the gathered EPR fees to fund reuse, remanufacture, and waste prevention activities. Yes, in Belgium today, obviously we have Le Pézerien and the Kringwinkels. We know that a key challenge for social enterprises that collect secondhand clothes is the societal service they provide by dealing with all of the waste that they can't reuse. So maybe EPR fees could better support these types of operations. So then, very last point is, yes, why is EPR an opportunity for the environment and for textile businesses? So the basic point I want to make is that companies can be proactive. We don't know what EPR is going to look like yet in Belgium, whether it'll be in a country approach, whether it will be an EU approach, but companies can anticipate this and already take steps to improve durability, repairability, and overall environmental performance of products, because that will stand them in good stead for being for having a lower EPR fee potentially. And of course, we know that citizens, consumers want planet-friendly textiles. So this is something that's also going to be important for the bottom line in terms of keeping in line with consumers' expectations. I think that's my last point. And yes, my last point is that to be proactive and engaging in forums like this, I think is super important. And to keep in mind that EPR can be more than just thinking about who pays for and organizes recycling. So looking forward to shaping the future of EPR in Belgium and beyond together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emily, for this super interesting presentation. I want to stress something that you said at the end, is that indeed we don't know what the legislation will look like yet, but it shouldn't be a reason for enterprise not to start doing things on a voluntary basis, and that's the most important. Not only because there will be potentially legislation, but because it's needed for the environment and the social conditions all over the world. Thank you, and I think Céline's presentation will be super complementary to what you just presented. Céline, you will tell us more about your own initiative and how you made products that are 100% sustainable.
Hello. Thank you, Brie. Hello to everybody. Thank you for the presentation. So yes, my name is Céline. I am the co-founder of Bonjour Maurice. And Bonjour Maurice was launched in 2017, and since the first day, we created the brand with a strong circular economy purpose. So let us not lie, as a brand that commercializes a new garment, we have an environmental impact. But since the beginning, we committed to have the lowest impact as possible. And for this reason, we tackle the whole product life cycle. So to illustrate, yes, our approach, I like to reuse the closed-loop model that illustrates each step of the project life cycle. So I will start with the first step, that is the resources phase. And for the resource, as many other brands, I will just move, yes, to the next slide. For the resources phase, as many other brands, we only use recycle of organic cotton, and the organic cotton is the global. Our organic cotton is GOTS certified. The GOTS is the international label, very well known, the global organic textile standard. As of today, many brands are committed to this phase, the resource phase, but as I explained just before, the feature of Bonjour Maurice, it's ready to tackle the whole product life cycle. So we decided to go further than only on the resources phase. The second step is it's a very important step, is the eco-conception. And at Bonjour Maurice, we design a garment that will obviously last over time, but also be worn more often. At that point, it's a real challenge in the fashion industry. So very concretely, Bonjour Maurice is reversible, unisex, casual, comfy, colorful garment to become the preferred brand of our kids and to be sure that they will wear our clothes as often as possible. It is a point where Bonjour Maurice innovates since the beginning. The third step of the closed-loop model is the production. On the production, we are committed to produce as local as possible to reduce the transport and ensure good working conditions. But we are also committed to reduce as much as possible the waste due to production of a new garment. So we don't match print with pattern piece. We often reuse the same fabric quality to have really a zero waste policy, and that is one of our commitment where we want to go further and further in the future. For the distribution phase, Bonjour Maurice is a digitally native vertical brand. So we are digitally not because it's trendy today, but really because we can have a better management of our stock level, and we can really have an impact on our production and commercialization. So we have a lower time to market. As of today, it's 3 months. For the capsule collection, we managed to have a production in 3 weeks, reducing the time to market allow us to have a really better production in terms of sales, and so a really better stock management and stock level. On the consumption phase, it's I will say the second most important phase at Bonjour Maurice, where already we innovate compared to compared to competition. So as other brands, we sell garments at units, but as nobody else on the market, we also commercialize a capsule wardrobe. And there we educate consumers to consume the good quantity, just what you need to dress your kids. It's neither too much, neither too little. And today we are the only brands on the market that sell at unit, that sell product at unit, but also with capsule wardrobe that we call the box. And the box is 5, 7 of 9 garments at a fixed price. And as everything is reversible, the box of 7 garments. With the box of 7 garments, you manage to have up to 48 outfits. And there it's very with the eco-conception two phase where Bonjour Maurice innovate compared to competition. For the last step of the product life cycle, we propose an end-of-life program, and it's our fidelity program where we have a take-back model. So we offer a voucher of 20% of our customer for reuse garment, Bonjour Maurice garment. And this second hand, we sell this second hand on our website or with partner. So that is our approach that we develop, and we are committed today to really have a holistic view of the circular economy and the product life cycle, and to tackle each step with commitment as of today and engagement for the future. So I think that I go through the whole presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Céline. And I can personally testify of the quality and how nice the product of Bonjour Maurice look. We will do a quick poll. Of course, we as we've said before, we don't know exactly what the legislation will look like. But based on what has been presented in the first panel and this panel, would like to know how your company would position itself in regards to a potential legislation on EPR. So if you can just respond to the poll, and it will just demonstrate how ready you think and how committed you are to making products for 100% sustainable life. So we have not too many questions, but I'm sure they will be coming in right now. There's one question from Caroline Grégoire. Citizens want planet-friendly textiles, which percentage of global population? To my knowledge, most citizens want cheap garments that they can change often.
Indeed, it's a real challenge. The price, it's a real challenge because there is a real price elasticity on the market. And we really notice that having a good product, quality, ethically made, it's people are really they are really interested about that, but they need price elasticity to purchase a garment. And it's also one of the reasons why we developed the box, because in the box you have an advantage on the price. The box is set at a fixed price, whatever the clothes shows. So with the box of 7 garments, all the garments are at 31 euro, and it's a discount up to 50. It's a savings up to 50%. And with this value proposition, we are able to produce, we are able to have a value proposition. We are able to answer a product need with a complete wardrobe with a fixed price and a discount. And indeed, the price is really the challenge of the market with this price elasticity, and brands need to take all that.
Maybe I can also answer that question. Yeah, I think it's, as I said in my presentation, that citizens want planet-friendly textiles, and this is in reference to various studies on EU citizens' attitudes, and there are studies that show that many people expect the textile industry to be more sustainable. But of course, I take your point that we also know that lots of consumers do buy cheap garments. But I would respond to that by saying that it's not necessarily because people want to do that. It's just because that's the conditions, that's the economic conditions that we all live in. So our demand is for EU policies and to drive resource efficient consumption, and to make it the case that sustainable products are the norm and not the exception, so that more of the really innovative and progressive measures, such as Céline outlined, becomes the norm, and something that's, the worst fast fashion, that's the exception. So it's really about using market measures and binding rules to change what's profitable, so that it doesn't just become the most front runner companies that have to struggle and take economic risks to make more sustainable options for people, which of course we know will be more expensive in the first instance. So it's really about making that shift and turning things around. That would be how I would view how we view the reality that, of course, lots of people are buying cheap garments, but I don't think it's because they inherently love that. I think it's just because that's the economic reality that we're living in.
Indeed, definitively, and I will say that there are, in the life cycle, in the world life cycle, we have the brand, the producer, but we also have to educate the consumer. There are really two phases that need to be addressed.
Yeah, no, super clear, and indeed, I think we all have an important role to play here today in making that shift, that systemic shift. There's another question from also Caroline Grégoire. Jeans Redesign is a circular eco-design promoted by Ellen MacArthur Foundation co-design with brands, textile experts. Brands use it more and more. What's your view on these redesign principles?
What I think about just it was because I was reading the chat. Could you repeat me the question, please, Brio? Sorry. I was reading and so the two things together, it's not possible for me.
No worries. So it's a question about the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Jeans Redesign is a circular eco-design promoted by Ellen MacArthur Foundation, co-designed with brands, textile experts. Brands use it more and more, and the question is, what's your view on these redesign principles, if you're aware of them?
Yes, yes, and it's upon that the redesign and the eco-conception we can go further and further. And in the past, yes, we designed a product based on fashion trends for a temporary time, and it's very important to think on the long term to have a design that lasts in terms of fabric, in terms of pattern, in terms of different aspects to produce something that can last over time. And I would say that in our approach, and also for kids, it's important to have something that lasts, but also something that's worn every day, that's produce something that can be used. It's why Bonjour Maurice decided to be very casual, to become, our challenge is to become the preferred brand of children, to be sure that they wear our garment as much as possible.
Yeah, I can just quickly answer this as well. I mean, from what I know of the jeans work from Ellen MacArthur Foundation, I think they've done some things like getting rid of rivets in jean design. So it's really about designing for disassembly. So I think what we can learn from this Ellen MacArthur work is and other pieces of work on eco-design is that when you're talking about eco-design, there's so many ways to approach it. So are you designing for durability? Are you designing for repair, for disassembly, or for recyclability, or a combination of all of those things? And designing for repair. I'm not sure if that's from, no, I don't think it's from the Ellen MacArthur one, but things like keeping a larger facing in a garment, which allows the consumer to have more fabric to work with if there's a hole in their garment and they need to find another bit of fabric to repair the hole. So I think it's really exciting, these small design details that can increase a garment's repairability and then of course in turn its durability. Yes. So I think we really need to kind of learn from all these initiatives that are going to inform the development of the what will become the binding new eco-design requirements.
Yes, and in the kids industry, we created a lot of needs with the gender. The gender came from during the 80s to create new markets, and also with the size, because we create, the fast fashion created many sizes that are not needed for the consumer. So those points were also taken into account at Bonjour Maurice, and it's why we create unisex garment to be sure that they can be worn by both gender.
Thank you. There's another question that I've been digging up in the chat. I remind you, if you have questions, ask them in the question. It's modular will be easier. So to be more sustainable, I would produce in Belgium, but prices are too high. How can we do to have a correct selling price at the end?
Yes, but that is a real challenge indeed, because as of today, we produce in Portugal. For price reason, also because in Portugal we have where the fabric are created, so to reduce the transfer. At the beginning we started in Belgium, but it's not so easy to produce in Belgium because the price is much more expensive, and so if you don't sell the product, you have an issue as well. So it's the challenge, and I hope that in the future we could have more opportunity in Belgium.
Thank you. Emily, you want to say a word? But
yeah, I mean, I don't have so much to add on this one, but yeah, indeed, it is the main challenge, and I think just to repeat, I think that it is about changing the market. So the more that we have all the different pieces of the textile strategy that increase demand for less fast fashion, more sustainable textiles, that all plays a part in bringing down, in creating the conditions that are more economically favourable for that type of activity.
Thank you. And there's some interesting response as well in the chat. Matthias Slaving saying that it's possible they're doing it, but also because it's a niche market that they're working in. So in some cases that can work. I don't think we have one question, but you can answer that in writing. But I'm quickly asking from B. Noé, I'm curious, which studies are you talking about? I'm into consumer inspiration.
Yeah, so there's the Eurobarometer, which is the European Union's own survey of European Union citizens' attitudes, which it carries out every 6 months, I think. I can find the links and share them afterwards. And there's one of our members, Changing Markets, did some research a few years ago, which into expectations of consumers and the difference between their expectations of what they expect from the fashion industry in terms of ethics, environmental impact, climate impact, and then the reality. So that's the two studies that I'm referencing when I say that. And there's probably many others as well, but yeah, happy to send those to you.
Thank you. There are other unanswered questions lower in the questions field. They were rather directed towards other panels, but I can ask them. Will sensitize the consumers to buy less garments from 75 to 2018 from 5.9 kilos per person to 20 person per year today? Or will you only blame the manufacturer? Will you push the brands to be more coherent?
I'm not sure I understand the focus of the question, but I think it's linked to one of the previous ones that, yeah, I think from my side, the responsibility really needs to be on those making massive profits from that increase in consumption. If I think that, I'm not quite sure if that answers the question, but so sorry if that doesn't.
I think it partly does, yeah. And I don't know if we responded to this one. So what about reducing use of artificial and synthetic material? Well, we know artificial and synthetic fibers are everywhere around the planet right now, and also the imaging.
I can, yeah, for us, it's really important that we don't, let's say, give synthetics a free ride in sustainability initiatives. And there's lots of problems with the many schemes that the metrics they use to compare fiber to fiber. And I think we can't forget that synthetics are from oil, they're fossil fuel based fiber. And it's not about having this artificial discussion about which is the best fiber. I think we really need to just bring it into an overall reduction approach, but that also specifically definitely acknowledges that it's boom in fast fashion production is completely, it goes hand in hand with the boom in polyester production over the last 2 decades. So we can't separate those two things. And also I just saw there was a question underneath also from Vanessa on bamboo. And I think that question really touches on greenwashing, and that's going to be another really important aspect of some of the EU policy initiatives that were outlined by Maria, notably on how to substantiate green claims. So that's a huge topic, obviously, but and it's linked to EPR. How do we determine what criteria and what metrics do we use to determine what is sustainable and what is not? So I think that's really crucial.
Yes, and I think also that it's important to have a global approach and to have engagement as of today, but also commitment for the future. Because for every brand, for every industry, there are steps that you have to really go further and to be all the time more current on the whole life cycle. And the first day, it's impossible to take out all the aspects. So it's very important in the management of the society to tackle that aspect and to be sure that the investors also are looking for the environmental impact and not only the financial KPIs.
Great, thank you so much to both of you. So I'll have a quick look at the results of the poll. We haven't that many responses. If you want to respond, it's on the right side of your window. You have the poll tab. We can see who is responding, so it's completely confidential. So and we won't judge you in what you respond. But it's interesting to see that there is a majority in process, and I think that's the case for probably most of the actors in the fashion sector that are already engaged in the process and to more sustainability. I think it's a never-ending process, and probably Celine can testify that you always can improve, and you need to start somewhere, and any step is welcome. So I think this illustrated it quite well. So thank you for responding to the poll. There was another question coming in terms of bamboo. Not all bamboo is damaging. It can be ethical if the chemical management is done properly in closed loops, and there we at Koch. I look at proof of certification in sustainable forestry. That's not really a question. If you want to react to that.
It wasn't to say that bamboo is bad or good. It's exactly as you said. It's as Celine also said. You need to look at the whole thing, and I think the problem is for consumers. Most information to consumers just gives us a very black or white information. You know, bamboo good or bamboo bad or cotton good. You know, it's really about how. And it's a question. How do we calculate and then communicate? How do we calculate and then how do we communicate that to consumers?
Yeah. And then a last question, because before we take another break, is there a platform in Belgium that help companies to find bio-sourced Belgian fibers, if they exist, like Merinos, Linen, and Chambre? I don't know if you have any idea.
There are platforms as of today for not only for the textile, for all the products, but there are platforms as of today. Digital platform or physical platform. I think about Wayo, the digital platform, for example, or we are working also with the partner Human, that's a physical partner that's engaged on the same aspects as us. So yes, there is.
Great. Well, thank you so much to both of you. I suggest we close 3 minutes earlier than expected. So we'll take a short break again, 10 minutes, and we'll meet back again to discuss due diligence. So at 11:22 sharp. Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back for this last panel. I think we can start again. 10 minutes have passed. So this last panel on due diligence, so how to identify and mitigate risk in your supply chain and eventually also in your operations abroad. This is a very complex topic and process, but more and more companies are doing it, and there are perspectives of legislation at the EU level and maybe at the Belgian level as well. Here with us today to help us understand that, we have Saartje Boutsen. She's co-founder of Studio D, that inspires, advises, and supports companies and organizations that want to do business sustainably. She has worked before as a sustainability manager at Class Retail Group, as a sustainable business advisor at VOCA, and as a freelance sustainability coach for various companies in the textile sector. Saartje will give us a pragmatic introduction to what is due diligence and how you can start the process as a fashion company. And then we have testimony from an enterprise from Tien Buysens, who's head of sustainability in charge of the due diligence process at Bell & Bow, a Belgian family business committed to build a sustainable future. Tien will share with us some insights on how SME can contribute to make the fashion industry more transparent, sustainable, and fair. Before I leave you the floor, I'll just like to respond to a question from Gregory Rorive in the chat. Everyone seems to have great ideas in the chat and suggestions, and so he's asking if the Shift can put a post on LinkedIn. So that's definitely something that we can do. And again, there is a LinkedIn page that has been created by Flanders DC and with our contribution for this purpose exactly. So we'll share the link again in the chat. Thank you, and Saartje, up to you.
Thanks, Brieux, for the introduction. So yeah, the Studio D, we offer support and advice to companies, also to fashion companies, to do their business more sustainably. And while you all known, already highlighted by the previous speakers, there are a lot of sustainability issues related to the fashion sector, like safety issues, like chemical issues. Both have impact on the workers as on the environment. We already spoke about the enormous ecological footprint of the textile sector, and of course there are a lot of social challenges too, like excessive overtime, child labor, forced labor, of course also living wages, etc. So a lot of challenges. And so, yeah, due diligence, that's about identifying those risks and trying to avoid and to limit these risks. So by taking up your corporate responsibility, by managing the risks in your supply chain, and by striving to transparency, to identify and to tackle all these bottlenecks. So if you want to take due diligence seriously, you need to dare to challenge the price-only mindset. So in general, a buyer is looking for the best price and the best quality for this price. But yeah, it's the challenge is to also incorporate ecological and social aspects into that quality, that you really incorporate sustainability into your procurement procedure. And yeah, you have to find ways in your way of working on how you can deal with this. It's also very important, of course, to have a support base for this within your company. So I think it's also about taking up an engagement by the management in doing this, in taking up sustainability in your procurement processes. You also need a support base within the procurement department with buyers to do this. Maybe that's already a first challenge to raise awareness on sustainability issues and how you can tackle these. Yeah, the next thing to do is really about knowing your supply chain. Supply chains of clothing, supply chains in general within the textile sector became really long and big and over the time and very complex. For example, for a simple cotton T-shirt, it starts already on the cotton field, where it's a big water footprint, where a lot of pesticides hurting the local communities. Then from the cotton is getting yarn. From yarn, it's going to the weaving mills, upwards to the CMT fabric. So in all these fabrics, you have ecological and social challenges. Then there is the packaging and the transport, often from Eastern production countries, coming by plane or by boat. To Europe, and via the distribution channels of our brands, finally to the shops and to your closet. But you see, it's a very long chain with a lot of different challenges. So how can you get more control on knowing your supply chain? It's always good to limit your number of suppliers, to build up long-term relationship with your suppliers, so that you really know them, that you can go into dialogue with them, that you can ask them questions, etc. So that makes it easier to identify your suppliers, because most brands, they know their tier 1 suppliers at the CMT factories, but it's much more difficult to know also the tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers. But by limit your number of suppliers, you will also limit the number of risks within your supply chain. And then, in that supply chain, it's a huge task to identify the social and environmental risks. As we know, there are many and several types of risks, like health and safety issues. We all know about the Rana Plaza disaster in Bangladesh. So there are issues about building safety, electricity safety, fire safety, but also within the factory. What about ergonomic conditions for people who have to work sometimes 90 or 100 hours within a factory? What about the storage of chemical materials and protection by gloves for cutting, etc. So a lot of health and safety issues that are actually relevant for every factory. But also you have certain high-risk countries. It's important that, for example, if you source in Bangladesh, you know there are risks like paying without below legal minimum wage or excessive overtime, child labor. You need to know those risks and control them. For example, if you work in China, there was over the last decades a good increase in legal minimum wages. But for example, at this moment, there are different warnings about the risk for forced labor of Uyghur minority people that are forced to work in factories. They're taking off their identity papers, etc. So, or if you work in India, in certain areas, you have to know that there are areas where girls and women need to work in compounds where it's all forced labor. But also closer to home in Turkey, there are today real risks for child labor and illegal labor, as there are a lot of serious refugees coming in the textile industry in Turkey, but also, for example, in Italy, in the region of Prato, that's called Little China. You have actually the same risks there as like sourcing in China. You have product-related issues. For example, if you produce denim jeans, there are specific risks, ecological and social, related to denim production. Or if you produce embroidery in China, as we know that embroidery it's really fits well with small hands. For example, water repellent clothing, that's also highly chemical. So you need to know that there are also more sustainable alternatives. And yeah, you just need to be aware of these kinds of risks. You can do some own research on it, for example, by using the Close the Loop tool. Or you can, if you join an initiative like Fair Wear Foundation, for example, they inform you about such risks. Or you can do some own research or questioning your suppliers. But the first thing is, to be aware about these risks. And then it's, of course, how can you prevent and tackle these risks? I think, the most important thing is go into dialogue with your suppliers. And if you just will remember one thing of this presentation, it needs to be this one. I think it's really important to go into dialogue with your suppliers. Maybe you think that it's not easy to do that about sensitive things like living wages, etc. I also was a bit nervous when I visited the first time suppliers in China or Bangladesh, and I thought, whoa, I never met this supplier, and now I have to ask him questions about living wages. But actually, once you're over that threshold, it's really not that difficult to discuss these kind of things with your suppliers. Most of them are really open to discuss it. That doesn't mean that it's also easy to solve these kind of problems, but at least you can go into the dialogue on root causes, etc. So and also just asking the question to your supplier, it maybe not immediately a solution for a certain topic, but just asking the question is already really important. To actually, you can make a wave in your supply chain by asking questions. If your supplier knows that you as a customer are really attached to these kind of issues, and that environmental management, for example, is important for you as a customer, then maybe he will also provide you with information and suggest you some sustainable fabrics, etc. But you will not get the information if you don't ask for it. And of course, you can use also some practical tools and instruments to take up, to go into dialogue with your suppliers. I think a basic one is a code of conduct, where you can agree with your supplier on certain things that you expect, social issues like, for example, on the picture, no bounded labor, nor discrimination, like gender violation is also a topic in the sector, no child labor, freedom of association, a living wage, reasonable hours of work, safe conditions, a legal contract. These are social issues, but you can also add environmental issues, for example, chemicals that you don't want to have in your clothing because they have certain allergic reactions, etc. You can include topics related to animal cruelty. So you can write down in a code of conduct what are important values and standards for your brand, and you can ask all your suppliers to sign it. I think that's a basis, but of course it doesn't can stay with a signature under a contract that goes in the closet afterwards. Of course, it's all about controlling if what's in the code of conduct is it also implemented on the work floor, and therefore you can build your own system about how you control it, how you go into dialogue with your suppliers, but you can also join initiatives like, for example, Ferrer Foundation. I think Tina will talk more about that, but it gives a structure and also a collaboration with other brands to work on this issue. You can also join Fair Labor Association, but that's more like Ferrer is more a European initiative where almost 200 brands are member of. Fair Labor Association and REP are more Anglo-Saxon initiatives. But you can also ask your supplier to send you social audits. If you ask not yet, you can organize social audits in your factories. For example, CEDEX or BSAI are generally internationally known systems where a lot of factories are audited by. But of course, you can also work with labels that you ask from your supplier, like Celine already told about that. She goes for global organic textile standards, where you have the guarantee that your fabrics are organic and made in socially well conditions. So a lot of initiatives that you can join or ask your supplier for that gives you guarantees on in which conditions the fabrics or the clothings are produced. Some other to-dos that I would recommend to take up in your due diligence processes. That is, for example, visit your suppliers. If you have the chance to visit them, you have already a more general insight in the supplier. Don't visit only the showroom of supplier, but we also visit the factory. And for example, if you go to the toilet, it's about like visiting a restaurant. If the toilet is clean, that says already something about the factory. Also, about the working conditions. You can see how health and safety is organized within the factory, but also outside the factory. For example, if I was on the Chinese countryside and I visit a factory, but around the factory there are nice little houses where the workers live, then you can leave that place with a good feeling. It's otherwise, if you come in Dhaka in Bangladesh, in a big factory where you know that the workers are living in the slum next door, then you can already ask more questions about living wages, for example. So visit your suppliers as much as possible. I know in COVID times it's more difficult, but when possible, do it. Also includes CSR issues systematically on the agenda. So if you visit a supplier or if he is visiting you, then you discuss as a buyer price and quality, etc. But also ask for his environmental engagements, his HR policy, etc. Because again, if you go into dialogue, you will get a lot of information, and you will know if you have a good feeling or if there are important issues to highlight and to have attention for. Another thing is includes CSR issues in or CSR in general in new supplier procedure. If you decide to work with a new supplier, ask to sign your code of conduct, but also ask for audit reports. Maybe use a questionnaire where you also ask about how is he using water, electricity, etc. in his factory. So if you have this information in beforehand, you can really make sustainability part of your sourcing process. And you can, for example, decide if the audit that I receive from the supplier, if it has, for example, not at least a BSCI C score, for example, we will not work with it. If sustainability is also a veto in your new supplier procedure, then that would really mean a good step forward. Also, if you have a vendor rating system, don't rate suppliers not only on the quality they deliver, do they deliver in time, but also give them a score on how do they how are they doing on CSR issues? Are they offering more sustainable fabrics? How do they? How is their environmental management? Do they deliver in time? So that it's not necessary to fly in, as flying has a bigger CO2 impact than transport by boat, for example. So reward good suppliers, give them extra orders if they are doing a good job on sustainability wise. These are just some things you can do to manage your due diligence. There are much more things you can do. Probably Tina will mention some more things that they are doing, but yeah, it's you have to find a tailor-made way of integrating due diligence in your sourcing process. Because due diligence is really closely linked with transparency, transparency in what you do and who you work with. And it's good to note that transparency is one of the factors with the highest impact on trust in your brand. And from recent research, it says that 94% of the consumers stay loyal to a brand that is fully transparent, and even 73% is willing to pay also more to a brand who they know, okay, they are transparent, they have enough attention for this sustainability issue. So today in a world full of fake news and colored marketing messages, trust is scarce, so it can be really an advantage if you work on trust, on transparency, on due diligence. One of, I think, a good example of being transparent is, for example, this transparency tool of GBC. So on their website, on the web shop, you can not only see information on the size and the cost of the clothing, but also where it is produced. So this is one way of communicating about just transparency, but also you can, for example, also make up a really well sustainability report or communication by social media, by hang tags, etc. So a lot of ways to communicate and to be transparent towards your customers. And at this moment there is not yet a real legal framework for due diligence. So all brands who are doing it, that are actually all voluntary initiatives till now. But as we learned also from the presentation from Maria, there are initiatives at the European level coming up. For example, also Didier Reinders is also working on legislation about green claims. So if you say if you make a sustainability claim, you really also need to prove it. If you're a big company or a small company, it will be necessary. Big companies today already have to report on due diligence and sustainability. But yeah, things are coming up, so I think it's rather interesting to be proactive instead of reactive. And yeah, also really interesting that recently more than 60 Belgian brands came up with the initiative and the question towards the Belgian government to make a legal framework for due diligence. As yeah, with a legal framework, it would be also more fair competition, because today some brands invest in it, others not. But yeah, if everybody has to invest in it, it's also yeah, more fair competition. So I would like to end my presentation with the message. So as a brand or as a consumer, buy the change you want to see in this world. So thank you very much. If there are questions afterwards, I will be happy.
Thank you so much, Saartje, for this very clear and action-oriented presentation on this complex process. And now an illustration from a company that's really engaged on due diligence with TIN. You can, yeah, there we go. You're on mute, Tim. That's the classic one.
I think now I had it all. At least I fixed my camera. Now everybody can hear me. So now I start sharing my presentation. Yes?
Great. Works.
Yes. So hello, my name is Tina. I'm head of sustainability for Bell & Bow. We are a small and medium enterprise fashion retailer in Belgium, and we are committed to build a more sustainable and honest world. We have a video, so of course I want to share it with you as an introduction. So here we go. Yeah, why I want to show it as an introduction of Bel and Beau. In Dutch, it's a bit better because then it has a voiceover. But anyway, sustainable business, I think everything starts with that. Bel and Beau is a 100% family business. So meaning we are committed for the future, for future generations. We want to leave a legacy, a successful business model in a good reality, and that's why we do it. It's embedded in our DNA. We need to align our business model within planetary boundaries, and it should be designed to benefit all. It should align with the Sustainable Development Goals. If you can achieve that, you are really taking up your part in this society, on our planet. So how do we tackle this? We have some categories. We want honest clothes, sustainable clothes. We want to engage, for example, with the NGO Banglabari, where we also want to contribute to society by building ecological houses in Bangladesh. We want to be a great place to work, and a small medium enterprise, what we do, we take action. We don't, we just do it. So due diligence, we are here on this topic today. I should explain it again. I will just take you into some of our best practices, but maybe adding, as a retailer, sourcing is where we have the highest impact. So due diligence, if you want to have a CSR roadmap, is one of the main things to tackle, how to limit social and environmental risks in your supply chain. Already another workshop, it learned that in CSR you are also complicit if you should have exercised due diligence, but you didn't. For example, again, remembering Rana Plaza, that maybe as a small Belgian retailer, you think, I don't want that, but what can I do? What is the scope of my responsibility? These things, these are valuable questions, but actually you should just start by asking questions and taking on that road. Just start somewhere. So you need to be transparent about it, and you need to be honest and dare to communicate, which is not always easy, because sometimes you can feel along the way you see even more risks and more things to tackle, and then you say, but we don't do that, we don't do that. Still be honest on the way ahead and the road so far. How to start your due diligence? You need to really organize. How did we do it back in the days? We studied. We ordered a study. Ernst & Young, they did it for us. They gave us some bullet points on how to make our supply chain more sustainable. They said we needed less suppliers. We needed to increase our own direct import. We needed to establish long-term relationships. We needed to visit our factories. And finally, you cannot do it alone. You need the right framework. You need to, if possible, join a multi-stakeholder initiative, taking into account all the issues that are present in the industry. So we knew what to do. Then we needed leadership. We need leverage. Within your business, you need the right people to be the drivers. So here in the board, everybody is like a chief sustainability officer. Everybody is committed, and they give CSR the necessary leverage, so that all involved departments internally will make sure to invest the necessary means and times to make it a success. For example, what did we have to do? We had to restructure our entire sourcing department. Previously, we were mostly working via intermediates, and they had a number of production locations, so that was difficult for us to keep track. So we needed more direct import. So how do you can do that, but then you also need our quality department exploded. It was like 5 times bigger now. We have our own styling department. Accountancy had to learn about opening LCs. So it was really a shift. Now already, I think we are up to 60 to 70% FOB of our FOB is already direct import. So you can already understand with those factories, we have a much closer working relationship, which is key to establish a good working relationship and your due diligence process. We needed to map our entire supply chain. For a retailer like Bell & Bow, we have everything. We sell to women, men, children. We have accessories. So that's tricky. That's tricky to start, but we had to map it. So we mapped it first tire, and we linked it to the ERP internal system. It then was embedded in the day-to-day business of sourcing. For example, when a new factory is being sourced, it's visited by myself and sourcing, then it needs to be uploaded in the ERP, linked to the orders. There is a lot of administration involved, and the sourcing department does that in close collaboration with myself, CSR, who gives final okay for a new factory. So we did it, and we were able to become Fairware member. In time, we also added the Accord on Fire and Building Safety in Bangladesh, which is more specifically for the risks in Bangladesh. We source a lot from Bangladesh, and there is a high risk on structural and fire safety. So we felt additional due diligence was needed. To make it really practical, I highlighted some of the steps. We visit our factories where our clothes are being produced. When we go, we engage in dialogue. We check the work floor. Like Saar already mentioned, we also have like a health and safety checklist, which helps us assess basic conditions. You can immediately already get a sense of how the factory is performing. Of course, we are no professionals, although along the way, not yet. So we also have independent parties auditing production locations. It can be a Fairware audit. We order ourselves in our main production locations, but we also use audits from other initiatives like Sarge already mentioned. It will be a lot similar. BSCI, CEDEX, you can use all that information objectively to assess. We collect all that information in a huge database, and we work together with the factories on remediating, improving working conditions in the production locations. We call it corrective action plans, and it's all steps for factories to tackle and along the way improving working environments. So we follow up on that. Then we provide for our main production locations education and training via Fairware. There is the code of conduct. That's the key to social compliance. There is a code of conduct, the code of labor practice. It has many names, but it is always the same, and it's used to inform the workers in their local language on their rights. They need to know. Also, that's why you have to give training to raise the awareness on their rights. So we have these panels hanging in factories so that they know. Also in the panels there is a number, a complaints mechanism, it's called. So if there is a complaint or a concern, they can turn to the helpline, and then Fairware local teams together with us, they will take it up and try to remediate. And then finally, Fairware, they also come and audit us because it's like it's a brand performance check guide you have, and each time they raise the bar a bit higher and they come and check whether you live up to your commitment. Like that. Okay, so Fairware, we accepted the challenge and there are still many things ahead. We need to further consolidate. We still have too many different suppliers, so we need to cut. Already we are on half the suppliers we used to have, but we also need to increase leverage in the production locations we are already at. So the more we buy in a specific location, the more leverage we will have to ask for change in the factory. So for a brand like Bell & Bow with a huge product range, that's really key. Due diligence, it's really dynamic. It changes all the time, so you really need to also follow up on this and identify the specific risks per country. It can change. For example, now Fairware made Turkey high risk because of the Syrian refugee crisis. They can have Syrian refugees working in the factory, not under the right conditions. So you need to be aware of those specific risks and take them in your monitoring and remediation process. You also need to take it back to the sourcing decisions. That's your due diligence process before ordering in a specific new production location. They need to be aware, and we need to have assessed those risks. Transparency is always ongoing. We had a bit of a, for our CEO, who is also head of sourcing, it is a challenge to give away all our production locations, especially our strategic partners, because he is still a bit afraid of competitors, because we are smaller, and it has happened in the past that a bigger brand, they can maybe have more volume, and then we can get kicked out. yeah, like that. But nonetheless, they are committed. We are committed to transparency. Already, Fairware has all our production locations. Anybody can ask about it. And now they are already publicized on the Fairware website, but not traced down to Bell and Bow. Another challenge is living wage. We need as a sector to evolve from minimum wage to a living wage, which helps, which is sufficient for a family to live on. It's a really complex issue. So for us as a brand, what can we do at this stage? We have started by open costing. We need to gain insight on how much does it actually cost, how much is actually the labor cost when you are producing a specific product. So we are engaging with 2 of our production locations to fill in the tool, and yeah, we will take it up from there and see how much is actually needed to be raised. Then due diligence. Next, I think I didn't give it the right title. Meaning we have really focused on the social part. Say you, like I said, you need to start somewhere, but on environmental part of due diligence, we have been really looking into it, but I think now 2021 is the time when we will be ready to really pragmatically tackle all these things. As in previously, it was more theoretically, we were not really ready, but now the right drivers again are in the seats at sourcing to make this a success. So by summer 2022, we want to have at least more than half of our resources and materials sustainable, so low impact materials. And of course, we have been looking tirelessly for many years how to close our loop, how to evolve from a linear model to the circular version. We have learned it's quite innovative, especially in the current way we are doing business in the current economic reality. So it's innovative. So we needed to collaborate. We have talked with numerous stakeholders, like we engaged with Flanders Logistics to help us get a clearer insight in the back office of recycling. We talked with Kringwinkel how to collect. Now I feel maybe it can finally come together, because we will receive a grant from the European Commission Union.
Sorry, Tin, we'll have to wrap up because we have just a few minutes left and we want to ask a few questions. So if you can just wrap up in.
It's my last slide. I will do it. Yeah. So now we are ready. They have gathered for us the right partners for us to tackle this issue, and we will try to. We will receive a grant to try to create our bestseller dress in a circular way. We also want to go beyond first tire, because now we are only looking at production locations. Already for some of the factory, we are going further down the supply chain. And yeah, environmental risks, it's already included in some of the audit reports we receive now. So we take that protection of the environment as a small part of our remediation, but it needs to be uplifted. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to both of you. I think indeed there is one thing in particular to remember is that it's important to go into dialogue with your suppliers. You know, it starts anyways. Pick your phone and engage with them on about sustainability. So we have just a few minutes left, so we might extend a little bit to ask a question. We wanted to organize another poll asking how do you consider yourself, your company, in regards to due diligence. If you can quickly respond, that would be great. There was a question that I thought was super interesting and very important from Gregory Orive, who says, I'm in the minority of people here who are humble employees. Any tips on how we can convince our employees to move towards stakeholder capitalism and a more sustainable approach? Mine puts textile on the market, but doesn't want to hear about any of this. If I can provide a quick answer to this, I think it's important to understand that sustainability is no longer an option. It's not a nice thing to have. It becomes a condition, and it's becoming an obligation. And everyone has to understand that, and including, of course, people in charge of the companies. And as an employee of the companies, and we see that as the shift with all our members, any employee of any company has a role to play by either just speaking with your colleagues, it's exchanging on how your company is doing on sustainability, by trying to find information as you're doing, as I see in the chat, Gregory, about the potential impact of your company, and by trying to raise that up to the management. So any action, I think, that goes into direction is good and is super important. So we have another question for Sarch. What's the source of the claim that 72% of consumers are willing to pay more?
Yeah, I wrote. Yeah, I read this in the latest book of Steven van Belleghem, who is an international known marketing and business strategist, and his source was the academical Journal of Ethics research study that was just published in the Journal of Ethics.
Thank you. And then a question to Tin. If I'm right, you said you're having audits done by Fairware and or BSCI. What difference you make between the two, and how do you choose which one will make the audit?
Yeah, the difference between the two, of course, our preference would be the Fairware audit, because they go a bit further in assessing the situation. For example, they also do interviews outside factory premises, so that maybe they can cross-check some of the findings that came up during worker interviews. That's one of the practices Fairware does that a business initiative like BSCI doesn't do. But of course, our supply chain is too extensive we can't pay for all our factories to have a Fairware audit. So when they can provide us a valuable BSCI or CEDEC whatever report, we also use that as the primary basis of starting the whole due diligence process in that factory. If the production location becomes more important to us somewhere down along the way, then we can order a Fairware audit on top of that to have additional information. That's how we how we work. Yeah.
Thank you. And a last question, probably for Sarge or any of you actually. Are there also labels you can meet as a small custom designer tailor?
Yeah, of course. Also, as a smaller brand or designer, you can work with labels. I think Céline from Bonjour Maurice told, for example, that she works with GOTS. So you don't need to be GOTS certified by yourself and paying for it, but you can ask it from your supplier. Maybe also your supplier will ask an extra cost for it, but yeah, it's normally for organic cotton nowadays it's already a reasonable extra cost. Or yeah, like Tina said, you can also ask for social audits like BSCI or CEDEX or other systems without organizing and paying yourself for the audit. The best case, already bigger clients, same supplier, have paid for the audit, and normally suppliers and also other brands are willing to share this kind of information.
Great. Well, thank you. We have to wrap up and conclude, unfortunately, because we have already passed by 3 minutes. So thank you very much to both of you for your valuable insights. I would like to add that the shift as part of the Belgian SDG Charter for international development, we're particularly interested by the implementation of the due diligence process by companies and in particular small and medium scale enterprises. We've done a few webinars on the topic, including a recent webinar on how to engage in a dialogue with suppliers about sustainability. So that probably rings a bell. And we have recently initiated a workshop series with 5 SMEs, including Jean from Bell & Bow. And we are, of course, always interested to hear from companies that have initiated the process. So let us know if that's your case. So to wrap up, thank you so much to all our participants today, all the speakers for the brilliant presentation. We've, I'm sure, learned a lot. And thank you to our partners, Flanders DCW, so Wallonie Bruxelles Design and Mode, and Mode and Design Brussels for their contribution in organizing this webinar, and to all of you, of course, who attended the webinar. I remind you that we will send the takeaway documents, Sewing the Box, with many relevant information and links. You can also find a lot of information on the Close the Loop website. And also, please join the LinkedIn group Sustainable Fashion and Textile Belgium that was just kicked off to stay informed about news and coming events related to the topic. There will be, via this LinkedIn page, a link to a form that you can fill in if you want to reach out to us, if you have questions or recommendation or suggestion, or maybe testimonies to share, anything, you can do it through this link. We'll also, of course, follow up with our partners from today's webinar to see how we can keep improving the sustainability of the Belgian textile industry by creating more connection between all actors. So stay tuned.